guys, and welcome back to another video. So this footage was actually from probably a couple of weeks ago, as this was during, I think, just after the third day of Carrotland, and I wanted to do just a bunch of sketches with the 6B pencil in Procreate based off of some of the photos that I've taken, like screenshots I guess I've taken during the Carrotland fan meeting. So that is what we are going to be doing today. And the reason why this footage has been kind of sitting on my computer for a little while is that I was going to use this for a backup video, which suddenly had to be today because I was going to have a ASMR video set for today, but that ASMR video I was not able to complete because I got like heavily congested when filming, and I tend to film at night, which it does get quite a bit chillier, so I might actually finish filming the rest after I finish editing this video. We'll see. But also because there was just a lot of noise at night for that one day where I was trying to film, so therefore I wasn't able to complete it on time. But enough about my kind of weird scheduling of stuff. Let's talk about the kind of style that I wanted to go for these sketches. So I have these sketches of S-Coops done with the 6B pencil and like kind of watercolor washes, and then I have these ones of Oneul done with just a 6B pencil but a variation of kind of like a dark gray and white and kind of like that pale warm gray background. So for these doodles I did want to have kind of an intense black look because I wanted higher contrast, because I love that look for like traditional art, also because you can see the texture a little bit more from the 6B pencil, so I wanted to kind of take advantage of that. So a lot of the darker areas that I can achieve, I can either do it by cross hatching quite a bit or kind of like tilting my pencil so that you kind of get those thicker dark marks from the side of the pencil from being tilted. So that's kind of like one of the advantages I love about using the Apple Pencil on Procreate, is because some of these brushes does have the tilt function, so you're kind of replicating that ability to use the side of a pencil like in traditional art. So the 6B pencil, I don't think I've changed much of the settings other than the opacity or whatever the second slider you consider. Pretty much like whatever brush I use, I never use it at full opacity. You also can combat this a little bit if you also change your pressure sensitivity to be a little bit different, so that you don't have to press as hard to get like, you know, certain marks. But then also I like having the ability to build up value slowly, so I kind of need to find a happy middle from being able to build up a good range of values via pressure, but I also want to have pressure so that I'm not pressing super duper hard for me to achieve that look. So for the kind of subject of who I'm drawing, it's going to change depending on each individual sketch, but I wanted a little bit of a theme. So I think I talked about this in not this Monday's sketchbook doodles video, but the previous one. So I think that's the one I did with the pastel colors, and they were like blue and pink, and they were of the 17 members, and it was of Carrotland, and those ones were a little bit more like cute, soft, and like a little bit more like upbeat and kind of just like, you know, having a fun time. But for this one I kind of want to shift in mood, and I drew a lot of them hugging each other because I don't know, I also felt very emotional watching that specific Carrotland compared to previous years. And obviously if you were able to watch it or just seen clips and different moments on Twitter or whatever people are posting these kinds of moments, maybe it's Tumblr or Instagram, who knows, there was a lot of like emotional parts, and I just like seeing their brotherly love with one another because I can see how much they cherish and treasure each other. So I kind of wanted to capture some of the moments that I was able to find, either screenshots that I've taken or screenshots that I've seen on Twitter. So yeah, a lot of them are just hugging poses because a lot of them are feeling quite a bit of emotion, and they were just comforting each other during the kind of like the last stretch of the fan meeting. So yeah, the first ones I am drawing is of Mingyu and Dogyam. So Mingyu is the one that is hugging Dogyam. Dogyam is the one that is kind of nuzzling his face into the taller one's shoulder, as Mingyu is kind of significantly taller than quite a lot of the members. So yeah, I did my best to kind of do one that didn't really focus on the face as much. just because I feel like me just doing the interaction without the need of the face was enough for this one, and it was kind of like my practice run of getting used to using this brush again and kind of pushing and seeing how much texture or value I wanted to incorporate into each individual sketch. I think a little bit later we'll be adding a little bit of white and also adding a little bit of the gray wash like I did for the other sketches. And I'm kind of combining the two different methods just because I think it just looks a little bit better and makes it a little bit more cohesive. But I do like sketching with just the 6B pencil too. I think for this one, I want to say I'm using a black color probably. If not, I'm using like a super dark gray, like maybe a couple notches from the bottom. Actually, let me open up my iPad. I actually can check, and I can probably check when I actually drew this. So yeah, it's not quite black. It's like just a little bit of ways from the bottom of the value scale, I guess. So it's a super dark gray. So it still reads quite black. So yeah, I don't think this makes that much of a difference. So the day that I drew it on was actually 10 days ago. So I drew it on the 12th. Yeah, I was saving this, but also like a part of me, sometimes I record videos and then I scrap the footage because sometimes I just don't feel like what I drew is what I wanted to post or even post in the future. And I did think about whether or not I was gonna post this or not, because sometimes I treat doodles like maybe it's just for myself and I'm just, you know, having a time where either I'm feeling a little bit emotional or I just want time to myself where I'm just calmly sketching. I think the amount of time on this, I actually can check. I want to say it's like 2 hours ish. Oh no, it's like 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours of doing the sketches for these. So I think majority of the time was me fixing the hands on the third and fourth doodle, as well as just me taking time to build up the value slowly. Because sometimes if you're seeing how I'm doing Mingyu's hair, I'm kind of doing like the smaller emotions for the most part and kind of just building up the value. But when I start doing like some of the darker areas and bigger chunks, I will use like more of the tilt to take advantage of that to block in the values. But I feel like working like this definitely helps me consider the values a little bit more and just kind of focus on that kind of fundamentals of me just trying to figure out values and shapes as much as I can. Also, it was just good practice because I don't draw a lot of characters interacting with one another, so it's definitely good practice for me. And I feel like hugging or any like overlap of the body is fairly difficult, but luckily for me I did have reference, so it's just easier for me to break down in my brain. But usually when I think about like characters hugging or being in close proximity, overlapping of the body becomes like fairly confusing for me. So I don't know, I always say like there's so many things I want to practice, but there's so many hours in a day and like so many days that you have somewhat free time, which I feel like is not, I don't know, I still feel like guilty sometimes when I take too many hours of free time, even just like in a day. So let's say even if I'm letting a video render, sometimes I would sketch in my sketchbook for a little bit, but then I feel guilty that I'm not working on other things. So sometimes I stop myself from sketching and then actually go do something else while the video is rendering or like some other task, because I don't like feeling unproductive. So yeah, it's something like I would like to combat a little bit, because sometimes I feel like I do need that break. But luckily I don't get burnout too quickly, at least I don't think so. But I'm always trying my best to keep kind of like a mental note so I don't get burnout. I think, yeah, for these ones, or like the specific drawing that I'm doing right now, or sketch, is of Woozy and Oneul. So Oneul is the one that you can't see his face and his head's really tucked in, or like really, like we're seeing the back view of him. I don't think I widen his shoulders enough. He does have a little bit wider shoulders, but sometimes when I stylize people, especially if I'm not drawing like the actual full body, I feel like sometimes I squish their bodies to be smaller and sometimes like squat, like shorter wise. So I think it's because I don't do shapes or lines prior. Sometimes when I sketch directly from a reference and I'm kind of just banking on my observational skill, I do screw up and kind of elongate certain things or make things shorter. I think I do have a habit of making things shorter rather than elongating, minus like maybe arms and fingers or something like that. But yeah, it's just, I do need to slow down and actually see what I see and not what I think I see, because I feel like that's like a problem usually with observational skill, especially with just like artists in general. If you don't take time to slow down, we tend to draw what we know rather than what we see, which causes a problem for some observational drawing. I'm trying to think what else to talk about for these, but I don't know. I just really enjoy using the 6B pencil like from time to time. I do like the texture. I mentioned in like previous videos, or even like I think last Saturday's video, I mentioned that I don't really like texture in my pieces, but I feel like sketches are a little bit different for me. Or even just like painting in general, you could probably definitely incorporate a lot more texture, and just like, you know, not everything has to be like perfect and smooth. But for me, sketching, because sketching is such a, I don't know, something that can be like super rough, and I do like the traditional feel that you get from a lot of these brushes that you can download on Procreate and stuff, or just Procreate has in general. It just feels a little bit more tactile, which I do like, and having like the tilt function or having the ability to kind of mimic a lot of pencil drawings is just really nice. And even though like I don't sketch in my sketchbook too often, I've been kind of struggling a little bit with that, because I did do like a few spreads off screen where I didn't record them, but I don't like them, even though I'm using pencil, and I feel like it's because I'm rushing rather than taking my time. I feel like some people have the pressure of when they're working in, let's say, like a sketchbook, or you want to deem it as a sketch, or you want to deem it as like, let's say, a doodle. Some people are very restrictive of the person's time. Like if you spend too much time on something, maybe it's not considered a sketch and it's overworked or something like that. And I feel like maybe I'm in that kind of mindset, which is kind of pushing me to not like kind of speed up my process of drawing. And I'm kind of getting mediocre result, which is why I probably stopped sketching as much. It's kind of like a bad feedback loop for me, or negative feedback loop. But I'm gonna try my best to take my time using the sketchbook, but then also just allowing myself to work in it, so I'm not like restricted by time frame, along with kind of just like the pressure of wanting to finish something, because I feel like sometimes that's just a hard balance for me. And the last few spreads that I did were very, I don't know, incomplete looking, but I feel like I did need that for me to realize I'm not spending the time I want to on those like spreads, because I know myself because of the paper, and because I know how little paper I have in that sketchbook. I want to treat every page or every spread like very preciously, but I don't feel like that's like the purpose of the sketchbook. Obviously it's going to be like catered towards the individual. Some people like to do finished paintings in their sketchbook, or finished drawings and make them full-blown like full pieces, but then some people do like scribbles, some people do scrapbooking, some people do like collages, like anything, making your sketchbook a lot more, you know, individualized and stuff. But I'm still struggling trying to find that balance, because I definitely realized that even though I said I want to sketch more in my sketchbook, I do know what's kind of preventing me from doing so. So I'm going to take my time. I'm going to find some comfort characters just to draw, get back and used to kind of how I like to proceed with the drawing or sketching, so I don't get too bummed out that the result is so terrible. Because I do like how these sketches turned out, and I know it's pretty much similar technique to how I would work traditionally, so I feel like that's also where the frustration's coming in a little bit. But the good news is that I did reach the halfway point in that sketchbook. So yeah, hopefully I will continue to work in it, and hopefully have a sketchbook tour so I can return back to my notebook and I don't have too much pressure again, so I can just kind of scribble and do whatever I want. I don't know, maybe it's just something in that paper. I kind of just want to paint, but I don't give myself enough time to do so rather than just sketching with pencil in it. For these doodles, it is also of Oneul and Woozy though. So Oneul's the one with the glasses, Woozy's the one that's kind of tucked in, and he's kind of like his head's thrown back a little bit. I don't think it's very legible. Like, he's not very readable once I do the shading, which is kind of disappointing, but it's because like I didn't section off the different parts nicely value-wise. So Wonu and his hoodie, so his hair is very dark, he has black hair, and then his hoodie is also, I think it's either navy blue or it's black, and I made sure to make it super dark on the outside edge, but as we get closer to where Woozy is, I lighten it up quite a bit, which I think separated Wonu's different sections well. But when I did Woozy's, I didn't separate his hair and his hoodie, so he kind of becomes like a weird blob, and because of that, you don't really see his ear anymore, so it doesn't read as like the side or like kind of like the back side of a face, if that makes sense. So yeah, that one's a little bit of my least favorite in terms of some of the ones that I did. But yeah, I also like to leave little names and arrows of the people that I doodle, just for like future reference if I ever want to be like, oh, who did I draw like today or like during this time. It's just easier for me to recognize sometimes, even though like I feel like these people that I've drawn, minus Mean Gear because you can't really see them, but for the most part I do know how I tend to draw their features, even though it's probably a little bit not as dramatic. Just like this one. So this one's of Hoshi. I didn't make his eyes as angular as I would have liked, because Hoshi does have a little bit more of thinner eyes that kind of tilt inwards and they point outwards. So yeah, I feel like I should have focused on that a little bit more, but he's the one hugging, and I believe it is Wonu, because Wonu and Woozy are the ones who got kind of hit super hard during the third day of Carrot Land. So yeah, it's just kind of in my feels of how much they love each other and cherish each other, and I don't know, just seeing them happy makes me happy, and seeing them emotional makes me emotional. So yeah, capture some of these moments just for kind of like the memories. Like I said, like some of the other sketchbook spreads that I've done in the past, especially during like my hardcore carrot phase. I still think I'm a hardcore carrot, I just don't spend a lot of time drawing them as much anymore, but I do watch their content a lot. I still listen to their music quite a bit and try to follow any of the activities that they're doing. Let's say like dramas or like OSTs and stuff. I'll try to keep up with them if I can, because I do enjoy them still, like a lot. So yeah, where was I going with that tangent? Oh, yeah, I like to record like those kinds of moments in my sketchbook, but because I don't draw them as much anymore, I haven't been recording those moments. I remember like back when I think June was doing drama filming in China, I drew something for like when he finished all the drama shoots and stuff, so it was like kind of recording the date when he finished that activity and he was gonna go back to the members and stuff and he was gonna meet back with them. It's just kind of like those kinds of moments I would have liked to record, and I haven't done so in a while, but I definitely think it's nice to look back on. And I don't think it has to be like catered towards like, let's say, K-pop group or whatever. Some people might do it for Genshin. Like I used to do it whenever a new character is released. I would draw them in my sketchbook, or at least try to. And like for some of them, if I wanted to summon them, I would also draw them. It's potentially like a catalyst. You know, some people do those kinds of like ritual for catalyst for summoning and stuff, and I was kind of in that mindset too for a while. But yeah, it's just fun to record things in your sketchbook so that in the future, whenever you want to look at past sketchbooks, there's kind of like a walk through memory lane a little bit. It's fun to do. I think it's the same thing with like childhood doodling and like drawings, and you look back on them, you can tell what series you're in, or like what style influenced your work at the time, or like maybe you learned how to draw hands, so that's all you drew, or like you learned how to do an eye style, so that's all you did, and it kind of brings back those memories. And I do want to keep my sketchbook a little bit more personal-ish, even though it's mostly just like whatever I'm personally interested in is what I usually put in my sketchbook, or like characters I like, series I'm interested in, songs if I can, things like that. If not, it's like very much just visually things I enjoy, so like plants and foliage, it could be color palettes, outfits you see on Pinterest. It's just like a way to record things in a sense. Okay, so as you can see, like for the current sketch I'm doing, you can see like a little bit of an outline of between the two different dark areas between Hoshi's hoodie and like the edge of Wanu's hoodie. I kind of left a little bit of a white edge around it so that it doesn't meld into one another, because even though yes they're like gonna be the same color and maybe it did blend in the fabric of the like the reference did kind of merge them together, I did want to keep them separate, and I feel like that's kind of what I missed on the other one where Woozy's kind of like in the crook of Wanu's neck or whatever, and he's kind of like bent backwards a little bit, and that's kind of like preventing me making them look like they're melding into one giant shape because it doesn't really read correctly. But also me leaving the line is very much like a stylistic choice because that's obviously not going to be there in real life. So, you know, kind of pick and choose your battles on how you want to stylize things if you choose to. So for the last little sketch, I did have an issue of trying to think of how I wanted to fill up the space, because the space between the last two doodles in the kind of like upper middle part, I did have an empty space, and I had the whole entire right side that had kind of this weird shape, which I didn't know how I wanted to do like any pose or any of the references that I had to fill in the space. Because I mentioned like even when I work with references and I'm kind of doing this sketch page-ish kind of look, I do play a little bit of Tetris and kind of fill in doodles into different like little slots and areas and stuff, so you can let kind of drawings overlap a little bit, or if you want to keep like an outline around them so that they don't overlap too much, but I do like kind of fitting them in kind of like a puzzle. So for this one I found one of, let's see, I'm trying to think, I think this one was from Twitter for sure because I don't remember taking a screenshot of this one, and it's just of Wonu looking upwards, and then on the right hand side, which I'm drawing Dogyam right now, you can probably tell by his nose shape, is that he's kind of hugging Wanu's shoulder from kind of like behind-ish, so he's kind of just like right over top, and it kind of fits the angle that I wanted because I didn't mind cutting off Wonu on the left side, even though the curve that I have of the other Wanu's head kind of makes it look like his neck is really thin and really curved and long. So even though it's a little awkward looking, I do think this one kind of fit the little area a little bit better than some of the other ones I could have picked, because a lot of the ones that have hugging, other than unless I'm looking directly at the back of one person and not the other, a lot of them are more like horizontal because it's kind of two bodies rather than just like one body overlapping one body directly. I think like luckily a lot of their outfits for the most part had either a lot of black or just had dark fabric. So, or I guess like, and their hair color as well. A lot of them had more of their natural hair color, if not kind of like a dark brown. So a lot of them, it was kind of just fun for me to play around with just the contrast and building up value. I think that's kind of was my goal for this particular spread for the most part anyways. I didn't really care about too much about accuracy about their faces or their expressions or anything, because I wanted to treat these ones more or less for myself for the most part. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun doing some of the moments that I enjoyed from Carrot Land during kind of like the more emotional parts, as well as just focusing on utilizing the values that I can kind of push here and there, along with kind of embracing a little bit of that texture from the pencil by cross hatching, kind of filling in with the thicker, broader end of it, and then kind of fleshing it out and fading it out with the thinner end. So yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed today's, like, not today's session, I guess, today's video session, if anything, because I did sketch these, like I said, like 10 days ago. So yeah, at the time I did enjoy working on these two. Also, I don't remember if I'm gonna show much of it a little bit later, but for the remaining gaps, which is the bottom right hand corner and then the upper center portion, I decide to fill it up with text, which is another way I like to fill in gaps here and there, both in my sketchbook and like on kind of like these little sketching spreads, because text I think is a good way to fill up space and kind of makes the whole thing a little bit more punchier if you can. And I think I mentioned in the other sketchbook video probably that sometimes I browse on 1001fonts.com and I literally look for different kind of fonts that I can, you know, reference and use them in my sketchbook to kind of fit the mood or fit the spread, or if I want kind of something punchier, you know, so I can kind of a little bit of different variation that's not just like bubble lettering or just like bold lettering or just like lettering that has like drop shadow and stuff, which I tend to default to. It's just sometimes nice to change it up here and there. I do want to do another session where I go back and watch some other Going 17 videos or just like other variety shows a long time ago probably, and do some in the moments again and do them in my sketchbook and just play around with color and doing like text bubbles and like doing quotes from them. That's another thing. If you like shows or movies or anything that has kind of like dialogue, this could be like books you enjoy, I think quotes is another fun way you can incorporate into like a sketching session. You can do like bubbles, you can just do text going across and behind characters or figures or like any kind of object or shape. I think there's like a fun way you can incorporate text that doesn't have to be in a super like designy way, but like in a way that kind of fits the spread. So, for the most part, yeah, fill up the little last portions with text because I didn't really feel putting a couple of figures here and there if they're going to be super duper covered. So I don't mind if text kind of gets overlapped too much because for most part it has easier implications of what it says or what it represents or whatever. Also, I added 2 new layers. So one layer is going to be underneath the sketches and I'm adding kind of like the white. Actually, I have 3 layers. So I have this white layer which is underneath my sketches so that the lines don't overlap. And then I'm gonna make another new one and kind of outline all the figures so that if there is any kind of doodle that's overlapping one another, I can kind of section them off. Because like I said, there's a lot of areas that have a lot of black or like dark area of solid-ish fill, so I don't want them to be one gigantic blob. So I am gonna separate them with a little bit of a white outline. And then after the white outline, I hopefully I showed it up briefly into the video, but I did add a watercolor wash. So I do like using the watercolor brush that is called, I think it's called Wet, and I like using that one to kind of add in a little bit of more tonal variation that's a little bit softer. And I mostly added it to their faces and their skin areas alongside with, I think, Do-Gyum's sweater, because I think he had a lighter sweater compared to the rest of the boys. So yeah, it's just like a more of a subtle way of adding shadow. Yeah, here we are. So you can see I'm adding kind of shadow here, and then I'm leaving some bands of where I want the highlight to be. So I'm kind of like not letting the gray touch like certain edges, making them have like a little bit of fold indication by making the shape a little bit more chunkier. And I think that's pretty much it for these sketches though, for the most part. So yeah, if you guys would like me to do more 6B pencil doodling in the future, do let me know. I do love kind of just dabbling with this brush here and there if I can digitally. So yeah, here's the time lapse, and I think this is where I'm gonna leave you guys for today. Thank you very much for watching and probably putting up with this kind of video even though it's kind of later in the day, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!